Going back on the record, the time on the video screen is 14:27 and 20 seconds. Please continue.
Ms. Edmonds, let me try to accelerate this. I believe on one of the exhibits, on the sentence I underlined, there's the statement to the effect, and I think Mr. Krikorian clarified this in his own deposition, that Gene Schmidt had received money from the government of Turkey. Do you have any personal knowledge that Gene Schmidt received money from the government of Turkey?
No.
No. You'll see also, I believe, on some of the, I think there are two other places in that exhibit I underlined, and there's the statement that Gene Schmidt received money from Turkish government-sponsored PACs. Do you have any personal knowledge as to whether or not Gene Schmidt received any money from Turkish government-sponsored PACs?
You're asking specifically about
Gene Schmidt, yes.
No.
Okay, that's enough. Now, I want to go back to the time frame in which I think you were identifying for Mr. Mannion those members of Congress who your judgment was had received bribes. And you had mentioned Mr. Blunt and Mr. Hastert and Mr. Burton and some others. Now, was your knowledge based upon information you had acquired prior to your leaving the FBI?
Her knowledge would have been based on information outside of the scope of her employment. That's how this deposition was set up.
Okay, but number one, your knowledge was not related to anything you learned in your FBI employment, but I'm also asking whether or not that knowledge outside your government employment was acquired prior to your leaving the FBI.
Well, let me rephrase it. There's much of what she learned while she was employed in the government that she happened to also learn through additional sources after she left the government. So if there was a corroborating source that she learned it from, whether or not she learned it in the government, she would have revealed it here.
Right, but I guess this is what I'm trying to clarify, is the time frame in which the information related. That is, were they bribed in 2001, 1998, or whatever? So what I'm asking is the information you acquired, whether it was corroborating information in the public record or not, relating to the bribery, were the bribes, the blackmail, in a time frame that was prior to April of 2002 when you left the FBI?
I'm going to object to the question. I think it's really mangled. I don't know what specific things you're talking about. You keep compounding things and conflating them.
The question is very simple.
No, it's not.
Okay, I'll go back.
Let me just finish.
Right.
I would ask, you've been doing this for your entire cross-examination, I would ask that you just ask simple, direct questions about specific things, not combining all the things you've talked about. Was that based upon information? Break it down. I just want to have a clear record.
Let's take one of those, Mr. Burton, you'd said received bribes from the government of Turkey. What years were those bribes received?
My information that is limited for the time period 1997 until January 2002.
Is that also true for all the others that you've identified for Mr. Mannion, that time frame?
All the others is a very broad.
No, I'm saying the ones that you had were on your blog. The ones, I think those were the ones that you related to Mr. Mannion. There were the pictures there that he was recounting. Mr. Hastert, Mr. Blunt, and I think there were some others there that I assume that you had identified on your blog.
Again, same object. I mean, I went through them one by one.
Okay, I'll go through them one by one.
I think that's what you should do.
All right, let's go there. So, Mr. Burton, your information related to the time frame 1997 up to the January of 2001. Mr. Blunt, what was the time frame of the information relating to bribery?
Mr. Blunt, to the best of my recollection, the same time period.
Mr. Hastert.
To the best of my recollection, the same time period.
Stephen Solars.
The best of my recollection would be 1999 till January 2002.
Mr. Gephardt, Richard Gephardt.
And I'm sorry, I have to correct it. Mr. Solars, I'm referring to in his capacity as his firm. He was not an elected representative during those. So we're not talking about congressional. This is talking about
the people that you had.
Okay, and that would, their activities of receiving or those kinds of activities that in the context that I explained for Mr. Stolar's role would be 1999 until January 2002.
And Mr. Richard Gephardt?
I don't have any information on Mr. Gephardt.
Having received any government
No.
bribes or otherwise?
No.
Do you have any information relating to bribery and blackmail of incumbent members of Congress that were after January of 2002?
You mean direct information?
Yes, based on personal knowledge.
No.
Do you know who Gene Schmidt is?
Limited to the news articles I have come across.
Before Mr. Gregorian spoke to you about 10 days ago, did you know anything about Gene Schmidt?
Very small amount that had to do with some computers in 2006 that had a glitch during election because it was on the headlines, but no, I didn't.
Did you know anything about the Turkish Coalition of America until it was raised in a question by Mr. Mann?
Either that or maybe in the past 1 year I may have received some of these emails that this organization sends on supporting Turkish, vote against Turkish genocide, because I get those from a student association. The name may have been there. I don't recall.
Do you know anything other than what you've just described here about known as TCA?
TCA, yes, I don't know anything.
You don't know who the officers are?
You work with them.
I think I'm Turkish American Legal Defense Fund.
Okay, then, all right, I don't.
But you would know that I work with them just because I told you. You didn't know it independently from me informing you. Is that correct, or did you know that independently?
Your name just came up in associated with that organization. Maybe it was in the article I read in Politico, but no.
Okay. I think you testified in the direct examination about state secrets and how that had been, the state secrets privilege had been employed in some of the litigation that you had initiated to obtain dismissal, I think, of your case, and then blocking, was it Motley Rice having access to a deposition. Now, state secrets privilege is a legal doctrine. Have you read Supreme Court cases that identify what the elements of a state secret is?
I have read so much in state secrets privilege and so many court documents. Are you talking about any recent Supreme Court?
Well, how about Doe versus Webster?
No, I haven't.
You haven't read that? Have you read Reynolds versus the United
Yes.
States? Totten versus the United States?
Yes. Again, I read all those during my court case, when my court case was active, so it would be 3-4 years ago, mainly those cases.
Mm-hmm. Have you testified on the pending legislation on state secrets? I think Jerry Nadler is the chief sponsor. Have you testified for any of the congressional committees considering state secrets legislation?
No. I have to qualify that. The congressional members have a kind of a gag order on them because of the retroactive classification and order they got from Justice Department during, I believe, Attorney General Ashcroft. So they don't even know if they can have me there.
Well, I've testified at the hearings, and they don't get into anything like that. It's just what the law ought to be, but that's aside from just let's move on. Have you put in a fair amount of, did you study lobbyists and lobby groups and how they operate in Washington?
I have been reading.
Read about how lobby groups operate in Washington?
Depends on what I have read.
Give me the books that you've read.
More
This is,
than
I don't,
books.
let me put a time frame. I don't want it to be endless. Say since you left the FBI.
Since I left the FBI, it has been mainly articles published both by mainstream media and also alternative media on at least the cases that have come up, whether it is on APAC or the conflict of interest case, such as the recent case that had to do with the defense contractors being related to a particular congressman, Murta, and how that lobbying caused. So it would be mainly mainstream media related article of the consequences of the foreign lobbies and the conflict of interest between certain business sectors lobby and congressional relations.
Have you ever read the Foreign Agents Registration Act?
Several years ago, yes, and I read it, I believe, at the Department of Justice's website. This would be around maybe 2006 or 2007.
And what's your understanding of when you have to register as a foreign agent?
Again, it's been a while. It was my understanding that if you worked and you lobbied on behalf of that foreign government.
If you're a lawyer, do you have to, if you represent a foreign government as a lawyer, do you have to register?
I don't know.
What about the Lobbying Disclosure Act? Are you familiar with that statute?
Not as an expert and someone very familiar with the technical language, but a very broad kind of understanding when I was reading, again, with just the regular mainstream media and alternative media articles published on the topic.
Do you have any personal knowledge of the campaign that was run by Mr. Krikorian in the 2007-2008 election cycle, in which he ran as an independent against Gene Schmidt in the 2nd District of Ohio? If I use the word a government-sponsored political action committee, what is your understanding of a foreign government-sponsored political action committee? What does that mean to you? In specifics, does that mean the foreign government is giving money to that political action committee or other things of value?
I'm not sure.
Does it have any meaning to you at all?
Government-sponsored political action committee. Guess, again, I don't know. I haven't read the description or definition of that particular terminology. But the meaning to me would be, it would be either by a commerce slash a business sponsored, and doesn't mean necessarily money, or the lobbying and the advocacy for by a certain group.
Okay, if it's not money, what are the other things that come to mind to you?
I am not sure.
But money would be the most prominent thing that would come to mind, or not? Other things compete with money as to what it means?
I guess that depends on which country, foreign country you're dealing with,
Dealing
and what
with
is
Turkey,
the
if it's
transparency.
Turkey, if it's a Turkish government sponsored.
If it's a Turkish-sponsored PAC, and up until, let's say, year 2002, January, it meant certain things. I don't know what it has meant since then, but up until 2002, it would have meant something.
And what was that?
When their donations are made to a certain PAC or a lobbying, well, during that time period, it was only done to PACs or PACs that are related to congressional candidates who had made covertly promises and deals, because they have overt promises. Yeah, I will be promoting commerce, etc., but covertly to further certain interests or agendas of certain business and entities. And sometimes, or most of the times, those were hand in hand with the certain government agents, the foreign government agents here.
So that was giving money prior to 2002, government-sponsored, Turkish sponsored PACs would be giving money to the PACs to give the money to the members of Congress?
No, you asked for the reason. You said, why would they give? And
No, I'm not. If I spoke that, it was inartful. I'm not asking why they gave. I'm just saying a Turkish government-sponsored PAC prior to 2002, I think that was the time frame you're referring to, meant, in your understanding, that the government of Turkey gave money to the PAC in order to give to members of Congress. I'm not asking what they thought in exchange.
Right,
for that.
and they did so overtly and covertly. For example, sometimes the money in form of a suitcase of cash would go to a certain person or a business entity, and from that business person entity would be divided to 10 people in order to not trace the origin of that money to that particular Turkish government agent or a Turkish government group. So they did it in a step, so it just depends.
So it would be like they would use a middleman. All right, the origin of the money is the government of Turkey. They give it to, looks like a private business or an entity, and they tell them, you then turn around and maybe give it to another middleman. So there's some kind of chain of custody that separates the government of Turkey directly from the end user, but the origin of the money is in Turkey.
Or a government entity associated with the...
A government-owned corporation or enterprise or something.
Or it can be an entity, let's say it can be a military attaché person that is doing that, is a Turkish military attaché, and that person is, that military attaché person is employed by the Turkish government, and suddenly says, okay, I have a suitcase of $45,000, and how are we going to distribute that? And let's say if they have a candidate in mind, there are ways they did it, and that would be one way would be they get some of that cash, they get the citizens, Turkish people who are citizens here, they write, they give them cash, and they have each one of those citizens write some amount like under $200, let's say, to a particular candidate. Even though that money didn't come from those U.S. citizens, the money came from Turkish embassy, and as long as it was under 200, they can get 500 Turkish people, each one write $200. So that's one of the ways they do it.
Okay, that answers my question. If a PAC gave campaign contributions to a member of Congress who was a sponsor of the Armenian Genocide Resolution, then you're pretty certain that would not be a PAC that got any money from the Turkish government?
Objection. Foundation.
Excuse me?
Foundation?
Oh, I think that you testified earlier in response to Mr. Marino's question. I think he was asking you to speculate a little bit that one of the ways in which the Turkish government was able to obtain promises and influence against the resolution, which you identified was the concern, was that they would invariably extract ironclad promises from members who were going to receive their money, that they would vote in particular ways. They would do the bidding. They didn't leave that open to chance, so that they would not give money to a candidate or to a member of Congress who wasn't pledged to oppose the genocide resolution. So I'm really asking, I guess I can ask it in a similar language, that is, if a PAC did give money to members of Congress who were sponsors of the genocide resolution, then is it your conclusion or opinion that PAC was not receiving any money from the Turkish government?
Objection. It's incomplete hypothetical.
Yes, that would be impossible to guess, because Armenian genocide was one criteria, but there were other criteria also, and that included, as I said, the criteria that were related to the weapons purchase from the United States, and which general in Turkey is going to get a cream of this thing, and who's going to get what money. So there were, as I said, the Armenian genocide was one of 3 or 4 criteria that they considered and honored in order to give money, or not only money, it was also other ways of giving position in a certain company to the son of certain congressional person, or keeping certain things secret, or etc. So that was one of them. Armenian genocide bill was one of them. So maybe I'm saying in a hypothetical situation, that particular candidate may be a sponsor of Armenian genocide, but on the other three criteria that is extremely important, or two other criteria, that person or candidate may be doing important, very important, giving an important favor to this. So I can't tell you. Just depends on the situation, or that candidate may be in a or incumbent maybe on a very sensitive committee in Congress or Senate, and in the position of obtaining some very important classified information they may want. So it can be other things under that scenario that you just discussed.
Right. So they look at a variety of criteria, and even if they don't satisfy all of them, they may get some money because they view some of the issues as more important than others of concern.
Maybe.
Okay.
Take a short break for 1 second.
Sure.
Going off the record, the time on the video screen is 14:48 and 7 seconds. Going back on the record, the time on the video screen is 14:49 and 32 seconds. Please continue.
Ms. Edmonds, have you ever been called as an expert witness in any litigation?
No.
Have you ever been called to testify at a committee hearing before Congress?
Yes.
And what hearings were those?
I don't recall. They're all available on the House website. And I have had several testimonies during hearings on whistleblower legislation. And also, I believe it was House Government Reform Committee that I was providing testimony on for civil liberties related issues, excessive secrecy and classification. I believe that was the title, 2005. You have to look at the website for house.gov. I don't remember.
Okay. I think you did testify about your knowledge of the Armenian genocide, the resolution. Have you ever read the Genocide Convention of 1948?
No.
Have you ever read the U.S. Genocide Statute?
No.
Do you know what the elements of genocide are?
Not technically.
So you don't know what the elements of genocide are. Do you know whether or not the United Nations has ever voted a resolution that endorsed the Armenian genocide claim?
No.
Do you know whether Great Britain Parliament has ever endorsed the Armenian genocide claim?
I am not sure about Great Britain.
That's the only question I'm asking right
no,
now.
I
No. How about government of Sweden?
I don't know.
Do you know the author Bernard Lewis?
Yes.
He's at the University of Princeton, correct?
Yes.
He's written voluminously about the Middle East. Is that your understanding?
I can't make objective any comments answer about Mr. Bernard Lewis'
I'm just
work.
have you read? I'm only asking about things in the public domain.
Yes, correct.
He's been a White House consultant.
Yes.
Do you consider him a person of stature in the community of scholars?
No.
You don't commit. Why do you not place him into that category?
I have my own personal reasons. They're based on my personal opinions.
And why is that? Why is it that you do not view him in the category of scholars in the Middle East?
Because I consider objectivity as one of the criteria for being considered scholarly and reputable, and I don't believe he is he is not agenda driven. I believe he is not objective. That's my personal opinion.
If you were hiring faculty at the University of Princeton, would you not hire Bernard Lewis as a scholar?
Objection.
I don't know. Depends on the situation.
Speculation.
She's speculated on whole sorts of things. Are you aware of the outstanding trials in Cambodia for the atrocities of Pol Pot?
Not the details.
Is it your view that what Pol Pot did was genocide?
Was it genocide?
Mhm.
I consider it a genocide.
Do you know that, in fact, there have been none of those who are on trial have been accused of genocide?
That they haven't been on trial?
No, they're on trial right now.
Correct.
they're not being charged with genocide.
Okay. Life is not perfect.
Now, I want to go through a list, and maybe we can add more, of the persons that you identified to Mr. Mannion that had committed crimes, either related to bribery or stealing classified information or otherwise. And my list was Mr. Roy Blunt, Mr. Tom Lantos, Mr. Dennis Hastert, Mr. Dan Burton, Mr. Stephen Solars, Mr. Robert Livingston. Are there other current or former members of Congress, to your knowledge, who have also committed crimes that have not been, none of these members have been prosecuted, but have also committed crimes that have not been prosecuted?
Based on definition, possibly one.
And who is that?
The lady we just talked about, Congresswoman.
But that would be the only addition you would make?
Based on my knowledge, with certainty, yes.
Now, what about, I think it's fair to say, in the executive branch, you identified Mark Grossman as also as someone who's guilty of a crime. Are there any other individuals in the executive branch who you know are also guilty of crimes of bribery, selling or leaking classified information to obtain a benefit or
I think the
otherwise?
witness identified activity she believed to be criminal, not that they were guilty of criminal activity. There's a
Well,
difference.
somebody has, if there's criminal activity, somebody has to commit the crime. It can't be a crime in the abstract. You have to have a defendant who does it.
Guilt is a legal determination. It's not whether you committed an act that's wrong.
I understand. I'm asking, bribery, I assume, when you mean bribery, you're not using that in a colloquial sense. That means something that you didn't like. Bribery is a specific elements of crime. Just like if you accuse somebody of murder, you don't get to decide what murder is. That's defamatory if you don't have any foundation for saying that, even though murder is a criminal concept. You had identified Mark Grossman as someone who was guilty of basically
Not use the
crime.
word guilty. Please rephrase.
And I also-
Engaging in criminal
And I
activity.
didn't identify, I said that name has been identified by other sources who have spoken to the media, and media has put forth that name. And yes, it's on the website, his picture is there. But I did not make any specific allegations about, or I haven't given specific information about Mr. Grossman. I said he has been identified to be the one. And when I was asked, is it correct? I said yes.
Okay. Personal information that Mr. Grossman has committed criminal activity.
Yes.
And that's based on your personal knowledge.
Yes.
Now, are there any other current or former members of the executive branch, and let's take the time frame 2001, 2009, that you have personal knowledge have engaged in criminal activity?
I can't cover time frame after January 2002.
Okay. Let's take the time frame 1997 up to 2002. Now, other than Mr. Grossman, do you have any other direct personal knowledge of executive branch officials, meaning executive branch in the United States, who were involved in criminal activity?
Yes.
And could you identify those?
My website identifies them by pictures.
Sorry, I don't, not familiar with your website. Could you just enumerate the names
Sure,
for me?
it is www.
No, I just would like the names of the individuals, not the website.
I haven't named them. I have their pictures. I haven't named those individuals. Their pictures, though. And if you were to ask me and name them yourself and ask me questions about them, then I will answer your
No, I'm
question.
asking you, can you identify the pictures on your website?
Yes, I can identify.
Okay, what are those pictures that you have on your website? Identify those pictures on your website.
I don't have any.
Who are executive branch officials who you say have been involved in criminal activity?
I don't have it in front of me.
You don't remember what's on your website? You're under oath. You don't know
Yes.
the pictures of the people who are on your website?
Yes, I do, and I
Then
can
I'd like you
point
to, I'm just asking you, just tell me who they are.
I have to look at them right now in front of me in order to identify each one of those individuals.
Do you have any name other than Mark Grossman that comes to mind?
Yes.
Name that person.
Yeah.
Going off the record, the time on the video screen is 14:58 and 13 seconds. Going back on the record, the time on the video screen is 14:59 and 39 seconds. Please continue.
We have objected to the question as it is formed would reveal classified information.
Is the picture you're maintaining on your website classified information?
The picture's not classified, but asking information related to why the picture is on the website would be.
All right. So getting to the end here, if I visit your website, your testimony is that the people whose pictures are there on your website have been involved, to your personal knowledge, in criminal activity.
No, she won't answer that question.
The answer is yes.
No, the witness will not answer that question as it relates to classified information.
I'll just visit your website. I think that's all.
Just do a couple of follow-ups and we'll be done. I wanted to go back to your some of the questions Mr. Fine asked you about contributions, government-sponsored PACs, et cetera. Back to that category. You had answered the question, I think, in part by saying there's covert support and there's overt support. In your experience, for example, you said you'd never heard of had not really heard of the Turkish American Council or
Coalition.
I'm sorry, which one?
Coalition.
The Coalition. Right. Turkish Coalition of America. That was the one you had not.
Because there are so many, with so many abbreviations, it's so hard, but I don't.
Okay. And I think earlier when you testified, you said you hadn't heard about the Turkish American Heritage PAC necessarily.
Again, they have so many names and abbreviation and talk that I don't recall now, but I may have known. I just can't. I don't recall it right now. Specific names of various PACs because there are so many different kinds that they set up.
And you described, I think what you were describing when you were describing the covert kinds of support, situation where an official has a suitcase full of cash, gives it to 10 people who are not government officials, and those 10 people make a contribution separately to
Correct.
the PAC. The PAC then gives money to whoever, right?
Correct.
And that would be something that would be considered a covert.
That was one of the covert
One of the ways to do it.
right.
And so you wouldn't expect, if that happened, for example, with the Turkish American Heritage PAC,
Right.
Some Turkish official gives a suitcase full of cash, 10 different people, they make contributions to the PAC. You wouldn't expect the PAC to put it on their website that they got money from the Turkish government.
They
right?
never do. I
No.
mean, up until, based on my knowledge, experience, till 2000,
Yeah,
they
no,
don't.
right. If they were doing that, you wouldn't have to listen to their phone conversations and figure out what they we would need counterintelligence operations, right?
Objection as to listening to phone conversations.
And in fact, if the treasurer of the PAC submitted an affidavit and said our PAC is not, never has been sponsored by the Turkish government and has never received any money or non-monetary support from the Turkish government, or as we know, that treasurer may not even know that the contributions came in from
Right.
those
Or
10
in-
people, right?
Correct. Or in some cases, the treasurer may be the key person involved carrying out these illegalities.
Right.
Let's
You-
say it was in Chicago.
Would you expect them to give us an affidavit saying, yes, we got money from the Turkish government through covert sources?
I wouldn't think so, no.
Right. If they would do that, you wouldn't have to review their telephone conversations. Right? You said that, I want to ask you a kind of personal question, if you don't have to answer if you don't want. You indicated that you're independently wealthy. And I assume that what you mean by that is you don't really have to work in a day-to-day job if you don't want to. You have sufficient means that you don't necessarily have to do that.
Currently,
Okay.
currently, my
now-
husband and I, yes, we worked very, very hard for 18 years, and before that he did. So, yes, we don't have to right now go and work full time.
Now, I got the impression from your testimony that when you went to work for the FBI back in 2001, that money was not the motivating factor for you.
Absolutely.
They offered you a chance to be an FBI special agent.
With the highest level GS, the moment I graduated from Quantico, because of the language abilities and the master's degree, they just put all the stuff which would have qualified me to start as GS-12 or GS-13 versus the GS-8 that regular agents would start. That was part of the offerings they were giving me as part of this package, yes.
No. It would be fair to say the FBI found you to be a fairly valuable resource right away?
Absolutely, and they have several commendation letters from all the agents. These are field agents that I worked with, and they all submitted commendation letters, and most of them would request specifically me for their own projects, yes.
Right. And then when the issues that got you, let's say, crosswise with the FBI, where they terminated your contract, the FBI's, the Office of OIG, actually investigated, determined that they really didn't pay enough attention to your allegations, and that they were substantiated, correct?
Correct.
And Mr. Fine asked you about the travel allegations, but the core allegations about Ms. Dickerson, they were substantiated.
Correct. They were all substantiated.
And so if it wasn't money, then why did you go to work for the FBI in the capacity that you did? What was it that motivated you to do that?
One reason only. Immediately after September 11, the FBI, the Justice Department, they kept coming on TV, radio, and they said they were desperately in need of language specialists in these areas because we didn't know if we were going to have other attacks, etc. And it just was like going and enlisting with the army or whatever. If there is a war and you're attacked and somebody attacks you, so I just joined in order to do something as a citizen to contribute because I did have those languages and the education, the background. So I was serving the FBI during the crises and the need, this so-called desperate need that they had.
So you had skills and experience that would be helpful to your country, right?
Correct.
And out of love of this country, you offered those skills and experience, correct?
Correct.
When you reported to your superiors at the FBI that you detected a case of attempted espionage, in essence, why did you do that? Why did you tell them about that?
Because I was, first of all, obligated for that security clearance and that employment. One of the things that I signed, I basically pledged to was, if somebody tries to recruit me, if I come across suspicious activities or recruitment and that kind of an incident, the first thing I had to do was to go and report it to my superiors and the security office. So I not only that I believed that I had to go and do it, I was obligated to do it.
And did you feel morally that, out of loyalty to your country, that you should report it?
Absolutely.
And when you, after you left the FBI and you testified before congressional committees, testified before the 9/11 Commission, etc., why were you doing that? Why were you telling them all the things you were telling them?
Because all along, and that even includes my court cases, the government used the state secrets privilege and classification to cover up operations and activities by Turkish entities, some of them governments, some of them rogue elements, and certain criminal U.S. persons that had nothing to do with national security of the people in the United States, that had nothing to do with the national interest. It only had to do with covering up these criminal activities because of those high-level people and officials and other people who benefited from it. And in fact, it jeopardized, and still does, American security, not having those people accountable and not pursuing those people criminally. And that was not only my belief, it was the belief of all the agents I work with who work on Turkish counterintelligence. Even when Department of Justice was told by State Department to shut down their investigation, this particular operations, these agents covertly continued it. Okay? And I have been through these commissions and going and testifying before Congress inside a SCIF, secure compartmentalized facilities. And even my court case was to put this information forward and force the issue so that it would be publicly addressed. First, American people would know what's been happening and what this information involved, not national security, not their security interests, just the opposite. And second, it would be truly pursued and investigated and prosecuted. So you would see accountability, not only ending it, but also we would see accountability, because treason, or these kinds of criminal activity, these are serious crime. And these were the beliefs of the agents I worked with, and some of these agents have talked with the members of the media. That's why you have seen some of these articles. They haven't gone by one or two sources. They have gone with multiple sources, and it hasn't happened to date. But that was the reason, that has been the reason why I have pursued it by all the expenses and exhaustion through courts, Congress, Inspector General's office, basically every legal available channel that was out there.
Have you written any books?
I'm in the process of writing a book, and I am also writing a book, academic book, which would be studied at Johns Hopkins and Georgetown University with Professor Weaver, called Shoot the Messenger, that has to do with whistleblower legislation, specifically national security whistleblowers and intelligence whistleblowers, which will be published at the end of 2010 by Kansas University Press.
And Professor Weaver, I think you said he previously worked for NSA, is that correct?
Correct, long time ago, 30
Can
years ago.
you tell us what his position with NSA was?
He was a member of Air Force, and it has something to do with, I don't know, it was highly classified, that had to do with communication, which is obvious for NSA.
Mr. Fine asked you about certain countries and whether they had passed resolutions recognizing the Armenian genocide. Do you recall that?
Correct.
Have some countries actually passed resolutions
Yes,
recognizing?
for example, France did that. And it was important because France was also threatened that their relationship with Turkey would end, and they were going to be regretting it, and they were going to become destitute, etc. And they did, and they did what they thought was right, and the relationship has been pretty good, as far as I know.
Right. And the United States has not passed a resolution recognizing the genocide.
No, as far as I know, it hasn't.
And that's in part because congressmen don't vote for it because they're lobbied by the Turkish lobby.
That's the leading question.
That's okay. You can answer it.
Also, the executive branch pressuring the Congress, because there always some reason. It's today is Iraq, and before that was Cold War, and then next is going to be Afghanistan, then it's going to be Central Asia, which is going to be futures, Middle East maybe. So there's always a reason not to do it.
You're pretty sure that the Turkish lobby is lobbying legislators and government officials in other countries as well to stop them from passing such resolutions?
I don't know.
Why do you feel that Bernard Lewis is not objective?
I have read some of his scholarly articles, and especially those that have to do with the strategy for the United States on foreign policy that includes Afghanistan and Central Asia. It's very driven, agenda-driven, that fulfills the agenda of certain entities that I happen to know about.
Okay. And by agenda-driven, you mean he starts with a point he's trying to make as opposed to doing real analysis?
Correct.
Okay. And what entities are you talking about when you say it's agenda-driven?
Certain business entities that are related to military-industrial complex and oil, and also certain business entities, foreign business entities, and that even includes certain business entities in Turkey.
I think you said that since you've been working with the organization you're working with now, the Whistleblowers Organization, you said that you continue to get information
Absolutely.
from people, right?
Including from Turkey, yes.
From Turkey, getting information from current government people?
CIA, Defense Intelligence Agencies, FBI, National Security Agency, every single intelligence agency we have. I have lots of contacts in all of them. And these are even people who haven't blown the whistle publicly yet.
Okay. Give me one moment, please. To your knowledge, do you have any information about the Turkish government sponsoring chairs at universities? Like Princeton, University of Utah, and the places?
Georgetown University. And not only that, some of these academic experts are also recruited agents who actively steal U.S. Military and intelligence-related information because they have security clearances and they have obtained position in high-level institutions. And one good example of it would be Rand Corporation and Professor Sabri Sayari in Georgetown University, who has stole tens of millions of dollars worth of secrets by actually recruiting people there that has been identified to him by his superiors, handlers, and he does it currently was doing it until 2002 with Rand Corporation. One of the individuals. That's like example of academic expert that they recruit.
And how do they recruit them, with money and other things?
Money, and in some cases combination of money and sexual related favors and information.
Now that you have had a chance to read the complaint,
No, I read the article with I didn't have time to read the complaint.
Okay. I won't ask you about the complaint then. I'll ask you to read it. Do you have anything else? No. Let me, if you don't mind, if you still have the complaint in front of you,
Yes. I was just
and
looking
if you would look at paragraph 14 of Ms. Schmidt's complaint, please. And I'm referring specifically to her reference to a letter from Mr. Krikorian. She quotes it as saying that Ms. Schmidt insanely, quote, denies the Christian Armenian genocide at the hands of the Muslim Ottoman Empire. And then it goes on to say a couple lines down, Jean Schmidt has taken $30,000 in blood money from Turkish-sponsored political action committees to deny the slaughter of 1.5 million Armenian men, women, and children by the Ottoman Turkish government during World War I. Do you see that?
Right.
Now, do you think that, based on everything that you know, that Mr. Krikorian's coming out of left field by saying something like that?
As I said, based on my first-hand information, my own knowledge, anybody who strongly comes and denies this and also has that kind of relationship with the Turkish-sponsored PACs and organizations, etc., at least in the past, it's been exactly for this particular reason. It's been representing the other foreign interests and not being objective, representing United States interests. So this, again, as I said, it fits, I don't know anything about this lady, but it fits the modus operandi of all the others who were on the payroll one way or another to just do this. They were on the payroll of the Turkish government entities.
So
Certain Turkish
wouldn't
government.
surprise you at all that Mr. Krikorian would say something like that, given the circumstances.
It's purely hypothetical and pure speculation. I mean, this goes over the top. How does she said he met Mr. Krikorian until 9 days ago, Mr. Mannion? You're asking her to get inside his head?
You can answer.
I mean, that doesn't surprise me.
Okay. Just, if you look at paragraph 20 of her complaint, she says it would be a crime under federal law for the Turkish government or any foreign national to fund a political action committee that made donations to a federal candidate seeking election to Congress, among other federal offices, and she cites a federal statute. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, many of the things that you described that you have personal knowledge of would be crimes under U.S. statutes, correct?
Absolutely, and we would have these people in jail, those people.
Give me one moment. Just bear with me. I'm sorry. Let me just ask it this. The passage I'm looking for, which is part of her complaint, is a statement that Mr. Krikorian made, or a question that he put to the voters of, by the way, you're not a voter in Ohio, are you?
No.
Okay. And you're not making contributions to Mr. Krikorian's
I haven't
campaign?
contributed to anyone.
Right. And so if Mr. Krikorian ask the question, just generally ask the question of those voters, why would you want to vote for someone who's taken money from a government whose policies and practices cost American lives? Would that be a crazy question for him to ask under your, based on your experience?
Absolutely not, and I would even go further for any candidate who starts really getting that kind of a close relationship with any foreign government to that degree and to get that kind of support because of that. That candidate, that would be a very valid, that would be a valid question, and I would not want to vote for someone.
Thank you, ma'am. That's all I have, and thank you again for coming.
I think if I just have two questions. One, Ms. Edmond, have you requested that the incumbent Attorney General, Eric Holder, investigate the crimes that you've identified at this deposition today?
I had asked his predecessor, Attorney General
I'm just asking
Ashcroft,
Mr. Holder.
with asking him to review and revoke my state secrets privilege. Basically, that's what I'm asking.
Excuse me, I did not ask about the state secrets privilege. Have you asked Mr. Holder, the current Attorney General, to investigate the crimes that you've identified at this deposition today?
No, not directly.
Okay. The second thing is, I believe in response to the last question, Mr. Mannion said if you were a voter, you certainly would not be inclined to vote for a candidate who had received and was receiving money from a foreign government.
No, that's not what
That's
I
not
said.
what, okay, what was,
The record says what it says, but you're mischaracterizing it again.
well, the record says, and if I can go back and if I can retrieve this here, I believe what the sentence that he was referring to, Mr. Mannion, was now I'm quoting, I ask the people of Ohio's 2nd Congressional District to ask themselves if our representative in Congress should be taking money from a foreign government that is killing our soldiers. And if that assertion is true, would you be inclined to vote against that candidate?
Yeah, that wasn't what I asked, but I don't have a problem with you asking that question.
Okay.
Okay, so the question is, would I vote for that person?
Yes.
If somebody who's done that?
Yeah. If a candidate was taking money from a foreign government,
Candidate was taking
money from a foreign government, and that government was the government of Turkey, or it could be any other.
any other government. No, I would have serious questions about that candidate.
Okay, that's all I've got.
Okay, that's all I have.
Just like to
Thank you
know-
very much. Do you have any questions?
And I'd just like to know for the record that the Justice Department apparently declined to attend the deposition, and that we've had no communications with them other than the written communications of yesterday.
That concludes it. Do you want to read it? Do you have a right to read the transcript and make corrections?
Yes, we would
Right
like a-
now,
You
you
want to
mean?
read
No,
the
we'd like a copy provided to the witness for
Okay.
her to read.
So should we give it to Mr. Trump?
That would be great.
Yes, and yes.
Do it. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Here marks the
Correct.
end of videotape number 2, taken in the deposition of Ms. Sibel Edmonds. Going off the record, the time on the video screen is 15:23 and 15 seconds.